Thanks for taking time to listen to this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Take a minute to go to therealresq.com to check out these and other great deals from our sponsors here at the Real ResQ. This episode of the Real ResQ podcast is brought to you by Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated helicopter hoist and winch provider. Axness, because when lives are at stake and conditions are challenging, clear communication is of the utmost importance. Sr3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. And rescueswimmershop.com, official high-quality apparel featuring the silhouette. Breeze Eastern, they dedicate themselves to our helicopter rescue world. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November of 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and the unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those being rescued has not. Contact them today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. The Axness PNG wireless ICS system can bring cutting-edge wireless intercommunication system technology to any aircraft. The PNG system can be fully integrated into an existing ICS system or can be carried on and off as a mobile base station. They can go anywhere at any time on any aircraft. Plus, with the strongest and most robust waterproofed handheld on the market, this system can take a hit and keep working. Their wireless intercom systems are designed to enhance situational awareness through improved communication capability. This system brings superior noise canceling technology to eliminate rotor wash and engine noise from your ICS. The Axness PNG wireless system is currently deployed in more than 1,800 public safety, air ambulance, and search and rescue aircrafts worldwide. I have personally used the Axness system in 4 different countries and on 5 different airframes. It is awesome. If you want more information, contact them today at axness.com. That's AXNES.com. You just make sure you tell them Quinn sent me. Sr3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help your helicopter training. They train daytime, nighttime, aerial firefighting, hoist, long line, fast rope, rappel, and more. They can assist your program with standardization and safety checks or just an FAA annual refresher. With the certified flight instructor pilots and experienced crew, they are ready to help your agency keep up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. Plus, right now, Sr3 is offering 10% off anything in their web store with the promo code, all capital letters, Real ResQ, REALRESQ. Plus, they are offering another 10% from their partners Petzl and their equipment. All you got to do is send an email to info@sr3rescueconcepts.com. Mention this podcast, the Real ResQ podcast, and they'll take care of the rest. And 15 years ago, photographer and Coast Guard rescue swimmer number 526, Chris Razok, created an iconic photograph. This photograph depicted the silhouette of a helicopter rescue swimmer reaching down for an outstretched hand in need against the American flag backdrop. The image went viral and became a symbol worldwide for the rescue community and the people they help. Its wild popularity inspired Chris to launch rescueswimmershop.com, a web store offering official high-quality apparel featuring his evocative image, the silhouette. T-shirts, hats, patches, and stickers featuring the silhouette are available at rescueswimmershop.com, including the flagship design So Others May Live. Follow Chris and his story on Instagram with the handle @RescueSwimmerShop. And if you are a rescue swimmer, support rescue swimmers, or just tell people you are one at the bar, this gear is definitely for you. When you get to the website, rescueswimmershop.com, enter the promo code, all lowercase, one word, RESCUE, RESCUE, for 10% off your order. Our next guest is a national park ranger, a climbing ranger, a paramedic, and he has got some epic stories. My gosh, they are amazing. So please welcome our next guest, Mr. David Weber. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real ResQ podcast. Today, I've got somebody with me that's like, oh man, it's just kind of super fun for me for many, many reasons. But let me start with his name, Mr. David Weber. What's up, Dave? How are you, buddy?
I'm great. How are you? It's good to see you again.
Oh man, it's good to see you too. So, Dave, you are a park ranger, a paramedic, a climbing ranger, and you do all this cool stuff in national parks. That's the short version.
That reads a lot better than my business card, but yes, I'm one of the climbing rangers.
You're welcome.
Up on Denali.
You know what? Take it and put it on there.
Thanks, man.
Sorry.
Maybe I'll just have an audio business card from now on, and people can just push play with your voice on it.
No,
I do most of those things you said. I am it's a National Park Service job. I'm one of the park rangers that has specialty in climbing and rescue. I've been up at Denali for the last 13 seasons, and I'm transitioning to the Teton Rescue team, where I've been for 2, and then I'm a flight medic and hoist rescuer at Intermountain Life Flight. That's kind of how I split my year. For the last 7 or 8 years, I've been kind of divided that way.
That's pretty cool. And when you say divided like season, you're literally up there for like summertime in Alaska, and then what, wintertime, spring and fall down in the States?
Yeah, pretty much the climbing season in Alaska has been kind of May to July, and then as I'm moving into the Teton March to July, and then my new climbing season will be kind of May to September in the Tetons, just given their season. And so I'm gone pretty much for that entire time doing rescue for the Park Service. I do travel back and forth to keep my employment status at Life Flight. I promised them a minimum number of shifts a month, and so I am flying. I have a lot of Delta miles.
Well done.
Bouncing back and forth. Yeah. I do
Mr.
get the
Dave,
question a lot.
You've been upgraded.
When I meet people or see them at a conference or something, they're like, how can I do that? I was like, they are never going to go for that gig again. It was the one and only mistake they made to let somebody have this schedule. And they're like, that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, we hate this.
Yeah, sorry, I blew it for everybody.
Oh man, you know what? I appreciate the honesty. All right, so that's out. Yeah, so don't ask. Oh man, that is funny. To give a little background about where you and I met, we were at HAI this last year, and which we had a great time at. And you and I both had an opportunity to speak at the APSA conference. And you actually went first, which I absolutely loved your presentation that you had there. You were talking a lot about training, and there was a lot of great information. And then I met you after. And I was like, man, you're going to stick around for mine. And you're like, nope, I'm leaving. I'm like, oh, thanks. So you didn't get to hear mine, but that's where we met, and the connection was made, and this is why you're here. So I'm stoked. Thank you so much for coming on.
I think so many people undervalue that connection and networking that happens at those conferences, because that's way more than half of what you tend to get out of that. It's the people that you come out of, connections you get while there, people you can wrap with about training or what their systems are. And I think that's a huge benefit to doing that, meeting people like you, where it's like, oh, you're doing this somewhere totally different, but where do the places collide? And I think that's a really neat thing that often administrators don't understand. They see us just going down to Dallas for a boondoggle, which there are elements of that, of course.
There are elements. Yeah, I agree.
But it is great to learn from each other, because everybody's doing it slightly different. And in the end, it turns out you kind of keep coming back to these basic principles that everybody's probably working on.
Which I totally agree with you too. I mean, you're gonna meet people down there, like at this conference and other conferences that are there. Like we were at the Goodrich conference, and you're meeting people, talking to them, listening to presentations that are going on about ideas and stuff that are out there. And then the app. So, all their presentations, it was like a good plethora of knowledge that comes in and out of there. It's like, wow. So, and you learn from people's mistakes too, because there's that talk as well. So,
right.
But
anyway. Yeah, the mistakes don't need to be your own, which is a really nice thing if you're willing to listen. I don't need to do it myself.
Hey guys, this is how not to do it. Oh,
yeah.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, someone did this for us, thankfully.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I'll tell you what, Dave, if you don't mind, give a little background about you, kind of where you're from, and how did you get into being a park ranger?
Yeah, it's a little convoluted story. My father was in the military, but got out when I really close to when I was born, but kind of kept that military movement in our life. So about every year he was an engineer. So we were bouncing all over the country. And I think with that, it was always priority to go on kind of national trip parks and be outside. And so that was probably my first, like the most basic introduction to all of it. And then once I hit college, that's where I got my paramedic. And then I also was an ocean lifeguard for the Park Service. That's a job apparently. And I was like, yeah, wow. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I'll hang out on the beach in California and Cape Cod. And so I think those were probably the initial forays for me into it was getting my paramedic and seeing that pre-hospital side of that and realizing, okay, there's stuff here that I really like. And then the really being outdoors with the Park Service and that ocean lifeguard job, doing true rescue. I think those are the things that probably set the hook for me. And then I think the last thing was also during college, I began working as a kind of an apprentice rock climbing guide. And that was probably when I found the element or where the kind of setting I wanted to do all this stuff in was like, okay, I really like being in the mountain with that other. But then you come back to your college counselor, or you like look in those "What Should I Do with My Life" books, and that answer's not in there that combines those things. They're like, that sounds like camp. You're like, sure, you can go back to kids camp.
Yeah.
So it took a little while until I found a job in Teton National Park, and they have backcountry and climbing ranger jobs there at that time. And that was it. That was the launching point for me, was seeing, okay, I can be outdoors, I can practice medicine, practice rescue, do that all in this kind of remote and rugged setting. And that was it. I was sold. And then everything from there was kind of focused on continuing to combine all those things however possible, and through whether mountain guiding, rock guiding, working for other parks, and that's what set it off. And that was just post college.
Dang, that is so killer. I love it. Well, I love rock climbing. Like, I love being outside and outdoors. Like, man, that's my world too. Oh, good for you.
I just feel really lucky because it I was kind of on that medicine track for a while in college, and like, you're talking to professors and you're talking to the career counselor people, and they're like, what you're talking about does not exist. You can't do what you're talking about. That's just,
yes,
and so
you
to have
can.
found that thing, I know, and here I am. People, you can. But so it's great, and I think just keep pushing for those things. And if it doesn't exactly exist, there's probably a way to pigeonhole it so that you can add a couple of those like roles together, or bring something into what you're currently doing. Like, I just taking no for an answer has just never been a real strong suit of mine. And I think just keep looking. It drove my parents nuts. They were just out visiting. It was really cool to watch them, who were kind of on more of a structured path. Both wanted that for their 3 kids, and my path was not at all that. And I'm pretty sure that I was the one that they were convinced was going to be living in their basement until they retired. And thankfully, everyone, I don't live in my parents' basement, in case you were wondering.
I was going to ask that. No. Oh, yeah, that's killer. You mentioned Cape Cod. Did you ever get climbing up in New Hampshire at all? So that first rock climbing job was in the Gunk Mountains in New York, and then the winter guiding, they would send us up to Conway, New Hampshire. And so that was
literally, people ask a lot, like having been to Rainier as a climbing ranger and then up to Denali as a climbing ranger, like, oh, where have you had like the worst personal trips, or where have you gotten your butt handed to you the most? The Presidential Mountains of New Hampshire, period, full stop. That place, like you look on a map, you see 6,000 feet, 5,000 feet, is an ass kicker. That place has like kicked my butt more than any other place I've ever been, period. And I love it about there. Like it's just so raw up there. And so, yeah, I've spent a decent amount of time in there, mainly getting my butt handed to me and figuring out some hard life lessons.
Oh, I love it. There's a couple, and I think it was Zion rock climbing area up there in New Hampshire. I think it was out of Conway as well, or at least close to it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I used to go lead climbing up there all the time. I absolutely loved it. God, I had a blast.
That's such a good place and such a hardy culture of climbers up there. Like it's just tough, like the tough as nails people that are like, it's not the REI catalog people. It's people out there doing really hard stuff in really hard conditions. And you're like, okay, I think I'm going to go west to where this is easier.
That's so
like
funny.
sunny and stuff.
I will tell you though, I remember climbing on one of the routes, and it was the middle of fall. And for those that don't know, New England fall is amazing. The colors on the trees, just the trees are just beautiful with colors, orange and reds, and just it's beautiful. Anyway, so we're up on this like ultimate ridge, and you get over the top of the tree line, and all you see is just these colors for miles, and you're like, wow. Like I actually had to stay up at the top of the climb for a minute, like, yeah, I got to take this in for a minute because this is pretty awesome. So
I felt like the Gunks is like that too. A bunch of those like river drainages and where those are, like it seems like you just get these, you're in the trees, and then all of a sudden you're not. And it's just these like, as far as you can see, landscapes that totally. I think not too many people appreciate there. You hear Big Sky, Montana, and these other places where it's just really easy to get the view. And there you work a little bit and you get these views, like you said, that seem like it's to the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. There's something to be said about that too. Like just, I mean, we're totally not on subject at all, but I do love climbing. I love getting to the top of the climb and just kind of taking it all in for a minute. When you turn around and you're 100 feet off the ground and you're like, yeah, this is pretty awesome. So it's
and I don't know, for me personally, it's just a really good challenge. I had a really great opportunity as I mentioned, this last year, just transitioning, being at Denali for 12 seasons and then making that move over the Tetons, like totally different environment. I'm going from glaciated mountaineering, ice climbing environment to like loose alpine rock environment. In my last season, I would tell every one of my ranger partners, I was like, great, you can lead this. Like I'm following you guys around here. To have that reset in your life, I think is awesome. For me, I relished in that so much last season, just being like, this is all new to me, or I haven't been in this terrain for a really long time. And so my risk assessment, my skill level, like all those things are below where I want them to be. And to have that just ability to be like, yep, I'm going to go back to this like novice place was awesome. It was so refreshing to be the new guy and to be in a new place and just be like, there's plenty of stuff to whoop me into shape there. And it's like, I was really, really thankful for that experience, because we don't get that too often. A bunch of us, I feel like we probably get in our jobs or we get in our role, and you get seniority and you get comfortable where you're at. And so it gets easy and comfortable. And I think being uncomfortable was a really good reminder that is something that I think is good and that I enjoy for some reason.
Man, I like that. I like being uncomfortable too. As weird as that sounds, go get into the cold water, stay into the hot, in that hot sun, be uncomfortable for a little bit, and then be like, oh, okay, I can survive.
Look,
for
I
a minute.
Die.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. All right, man. Well, David, if you don't mind, I'd like to get into your very first rescue, because I mean, from lifeguard to into paramedic, into everything you're doing. Do you remember your very first rescue?
Yeah, when you asked that question, one popped to mind right away, and I don't know if it was the very first, but it was definitely the most impactful. It was in Zion. It was that first season there for me, and if you haven't been there, it's just a huge canyon system made up by like the Zion River, and so it's all just eroded away, and you get these huge sheer canyon walls of a couple hundred feet. So very spectacular place, and probably one of the most commonly hiked things is this river corridor called the Narrows. And someone had fallen in there. There's a bunch of kind of side canyons and stuff, so people are always monkeying around in there and falling. And so this guy had fallen and hit his head pretty good. And so of course this is probably like week 1 in the park. And so we, gather the cavalry, get all our equipment, and the only way to access this place is you're just marching up the river. You could do it as a one-way trip, but most people just walked from the exit of the Narrows backwards and then would get to some point and turn back around. So we're just like marching up, just like everybody else, with all of this gear and a team of probably 20 people. And so I think that first piece, just the camaraderie, was a really cool piece for me, because all the rescue and lifeguarding was like 1 or 2 people and pretty small scale stuff. Bring them back to the beach, everything's fine. So this was like, we're like launching to the moon in my head, in my like 21-year-old head. And so I think just seeing the coordination, organization, teamwork was the pieces that were initially attractive. And then when we got there, for whatever reason, I did have my paramedic at that time, and I think that might have been the highest medical cert on scene. And so it was like, great, here's your patient. And I'm like, whoa, I'm just here to watch and learn. And so very quickly, it was myself and another person just handing off patient care the whole time. And this took forever. It was a really long carry out. I bet we're talking 6 to 8 hours by the time we got there, package him, and then we're essentially floating him in a raft on a backboard back down the Narrows. But it's not, the water's not that deep, so you're up and over rocks, and just a really long, challenging carry out, float out, if you will. And that was also the time that I realized people talk about litter carry outs, and that's probably what drives them to search and rescue for the first time. And I realized then, I was like, I think you only need to do one of these and check that box. Carrying a litter, it turns out, not that fun. I was like, just like people just getting beat up, like we're in water and moving around, and probably weren't alternating sides of the litter as often as we should. So you get beat up doing that work, and a helicopter is a really slick tool. It turns out. And so I think that was
real quick, how many people did you guys have to go get this guy on the team?
I bet we were close to 20. And so they were doing someone was orchestrating this, like, 6 people on, 6 people resting, 6 people ready to go back on rotation. And it just, even with that, it felt like extremely physically demanding. But then you're in terrain that you would probably have an issue with just walking in yourself. You're watching other people just fall that are just out for a hike in the water, which is this new and unique thing for most. And you're like, just walking here is hard. And now I'm like carrying this person up and over rocks. And yeah, it's tough work. And it's like, all credit in the world goes to those ground-based rescue teams. The folks that are doing that day in and day out, and it's all litter-based, is like, that's a beast, period. It's really hard work. And so good on everybody doing that. And then I think that the takeaways for this whole one is it was 6 to 8 hours probably before we got back out. It's dark, meet the ambulance, and pass this patient off. And the things that I think were the other takeaways for me were how much the patient needs a buddy and being that patient's like person. And so that ended up being myself and the other care provider. But there's so much going on around these patients. There's people walking in and out of the scene. There's a new group of 6 all the time coming in to carry them. And so it's really disorienting, I think, when you're hurt, when you're strapped to a backboard. And that was really good lesson for me that like every time we've got a patient, you got to assign that patient a buddy and be like, someone needs to be at the head and be like, hey, bud, it is Kevin. It is Dave. We are here with you. I'm going to explain what's going on. I'm still here with you. And the importance of that was really highlighted when we got a thank you note a couple weeks later from him. And it's Dave and everyone else. And that is not at all based on the care he was given or what I did that day, other than be his buddy and be by his head, and just kept reintroducing myself. Guy's got a head injury. Be like, hey, it's Dave. Here's where we are. Here's what we're doing. And I think that was something that was suggested to me by the other care providers. Like, hey, you be the one that just keeps talking to him. And,
Wow.
and that lesson has stuck with me this whole time. Is like the patient just needs a buddy. And I think that was probably one of the best things I could have learned at that point in time, because it's easy to just start doing the mechanics of a rescue. You're in there, you're walking through water, we're dragging this person up and down and over things to get through this like multiple miles of travel we had to do. And the most important thing we say is the patient, and then we often forget about the patient. We're like, we got this like stack of potatoes that we're just like walking down the trail. And so I think that was a healthy lesson and good reminder that has really been impactful for this whole time, since that was like 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you can call a helicopter nowadays, right?
I know. Yeah, I've heard about that. They kept that information from us for quite some time. They're like, no, this is the way to do it.
Oh, that's funny. Actually, you know what? In all seriousness, 20 years ago, you got to think about this, because I've been doing this for about 20 years. Not every helicopter out there had like a hoist or a way to do a rescue. That was really foreign to a lot of places. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we can put a hoist on this. The Coast Guard does it, and the Navy does it, and the Army does it. And
yeah, it's taken some time. And I feel like we can always look to Europe at what they're doing, and we're probably like 2 or 3 decades behind. They're using helicopters for everything and have been for quite some time. And I think that's slowly creeping in. But even still, in Zion today, they are calling folks out of Vegas, folks out of the Grand Canyon, or even our program out of the Salt Lake area to go down and do that work. There's still not one in that park. And so I think it's still just it's a pretty limited resource in the States, which I think some people really like, is that it feels like, hey, I am a bit more remote and rugged here. And if things go wrong, I'm not going to have that immediate helicopter response. I think that's changing. I think there's more aircraft kind of popping up everywhere with those capabilities, but it's still probably one of the things people enjoy, but it's also one of the things that make litter carries still have to happen.
Oh, that long walk, long walk.
And it's a hard conversation to have. And that conference that we were at together, I had a couple other chats with some administrators, and they see and hear helicopter, and it's probably because it's out of the box for them, or it's unfamiliar. It's automatically this scary or risk-filled tool, versus it was like, but do you know what you're asking your people to do when they're carrying a 200-pound person in a litter, in a waterway, with crappy footing, up and over rocks for 6 hours? Like that's not without risk either. And so it's like, just because it's on the ground doesn't mean it's any less risky or less scary. And I think that's a conversation I've had quite a bit with folks that are unfamiliar, because they just, for whatever reason, the helicopter and hoist or short haul rescue, that just has this appearance that it's much more dangerous or risky. So, and I think that is one thing that at first glance isn't always apparent, but the efficiency of a well-trained helicopter crew and the safety margin that exists there is really undeniable, compared to the risks that we're putting ground folks through when you're asking them to do things for multiple hours over really hard or difficult footing. The number of pictures I have where somebody's gotten hurt on a trail, and so then you look at what a trail rescue is, and it's usually the litter is hovering right over top of really well manicured trail, And then the rescuers, there's one group of rescuers off trail on the uphill side leaning over, and there's another group of rescuers on the downhill side off trail, like holding it above their head. And so it's like no one's on trail. So it's just, it is like the utmost respect for any time we're doing those rescues and any time that people are doing those, but to think that is somehow less risky, I think is not truly the case.
Yeah. You know what it is? We all talk about it all the time in all the conferences we go to. It's you see that litter spin underneath the helicopter and it's out of control. And people that don't know that world, they're like, oh my God, that's so dangerous. Well, yeah, but that's all so preventable. And we could have stopped that in many, many ways. But it would have taken your 20 people that you had out on the trail for 8 hours and had everybody done. You could have sent 2 guys up to stabilize a patient, call a helicopter. 20 minutes later, they're in, out, and done. So.
And it's a tool that's part of a larger system. And there's times when it is appropriate for one or the other. And there's times that weather or mechanical or whatever is going to shut that helicopter side of it down. And I think, I may have said it in that talk, and I think it is really important for us to all go back and realize at baseline, we all want to use our skills. We want to use and do whatever we've been trained for. Sometimes that's the right thing and sometimes it's not. And so if we can keep looking what is really best for this patient, if that was my team member or if it was my family member, what would I want done? I think that's probably a better frame of reference than, hey, we just took our rope rescue class and I really want to use a rope right now. Or I just learned how to do hoist and I really want to hoist them, when maybe, hey, that's a
you can land really like right over there.
We could probably just push them over and they'd hit their car.
Yeah. That's going as far as saying, I just learned how to do a crike. Let's do that.
Yeah.
The patient's talking to you and they're okay.
Yeah.
They've got a hurt
approaching
finger.
every
What's
patient with
you?
a scalpel. Hi, ma'am. I know you're saying that you just hurt your leg, but are you sure you're not having trouble breathing?
That is terrible. I should not be laughing. We should not be laughing. Dave, damn it.
I know. You can censor that out.
I'm probably not gonna.
But it is the truth. I mean, we all want to use our skills. Like we all train pretty hard and we all want to use our skills. And in the end, we've really just got to keep circling back to, if I knew this person, what would I want done for them? And then that's probably the right rescue technique. And even if that means my team or my skills are getting cut out of the equation on this particular instance.
Right. Yeah.
But
yeah. And you know what's funny about that is because like when the call comes in, everybody wants to be the first one there. So they can like, oh, we're gonna do it.
Yeah. We know why you want to be the first one there. So you don't have to think about those hard questions like, should I really be doing this right now?
No. Helicopter crew got there first. Let's do this before the boat gets there, before the ground crew gets there. Oh man, that's funny. I like it. Oh, what a good story, like a good memory to kind of start you out. Just kind of get the bug for all this. That's awesome. I like it.
Yeah, it had a bunch of good little like nuggets for me that have somehow stayed with me for a decent amount of time. And I think they were really good ones to learn so early on.
Excellent. Now you actually have a couple up in Denali that stand out to you as well. And I know we talked just a brief moment about them, but you had 2 separate falls and then somebody with a carbon monoxide poisoning and stuff. I mean, like the falls I can totally see off Denali in that area. That park is just amazing up there. But the carbon monoxide, that one, like, okay.
Yeah, there's been a lot there's been a ton that has happened up there. And so when you ask the question, kind of the memorable rescues, it's, these might just only be memorable for me. But they were just like that one in Zion, like ones that kind of stuck with me for different reasons. And it is, as you mentioned, it's a harsh, dynamic, like extremely inhospitable place at times. And all of our rescues kind of focused on Denali and that 20,000-foot peak. And we do rescue in all the mountains surrounding Denali, that kind of 100-mile range that's up there, the Alaska range.
It's a big
but
range.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's big and bold and remote. And there's places that people still haven't been in there and that probably won't be there maybe ever. It's just such a big place, but a lot of the activity centers around Denali because that's what most people are coming up there to do. And so all three of these happen on there. The kind of main climbing season, as I mentioned, for Denali is kind of late April to mid-July every year. And so we get 1,500 climbers or so every year, 1,200 climbers somewhere in there.
Wow.
They're coming up trying to summit. Yeah. And about half of them end up being successful in summiting, but it's a long process and different than all the other kind of 7 summits out there. You have to carry all your own stuff. There's no kind of porter staff. There's no one carrying your things to camp. And so people are showing up and they'll have, a 70-pound backpack and 70 to 100-pound sled that they're dragging behind them to start these trips. Because these trips are 3 weeks to 4 weeks long. And so that's all their food, all their gear. Oftentimes you're carrying stuff that like, I don't need this stuff until I'm really high in elevation, but I've got to carry it down low. So all these climbs started. Yeah. It's a wake up call, I think, for a lot of people, that first couple of days of just moving that. And you can't really train for that, like dragging that stuff around your neighborhood street is just, you can't drag that stuff
weird
around.
Looks out the window. People putting curtains around, like, what is he doing?
Yeah. So people usually are just like, well, I'll hike a lot and I'll carry a heavy backpack and then show up and be like, and then there's this thing now behind me and I might be on skis or snowshoes. And if I go downhill, the thing's trying to run me over. If I'm going uphill, it seems like it's trying to pull me backwards. And so I think it's a big learning curve for all of us every year, even going back year after year. That first day, you're like, oh yeah, this thing. The pig is back there.
This sucks. So, I can't wait to see you next year.
I know. I'll be back. And so these three kind of took place in kind of the very beginning of my career up there. One was in the middle and then one was towards the end. One was just like 2 years ago. And the first one was tough. It was a fall. So just to give you a little orientation, we show up and everyone flies onto the mountain at 7,200 feet. And then there's another big camp at 14,200 feet. And then there's a last camp at 17,200 feet. Along the main climbing corridor on Denali. And there's intermittent camps in between there that people stay at, but those are the big ones. And so we spend quite a bit of time at that 14,000 camp because that's a really good basin to fly into for our helicopter. It's where we've got probably the most robust medical and communications and living quarters up there that we set up every year. And so we interact also with a lot of people. It's also the launching point for probably like 6 or 7 different climbing routes from there. And so from this spot, you can venture out and do a bunch of different things. And so we interact with a bunch of people, talking to them about weather, route conditions, things like that during their time at 14,000 camp or advanced base camp. And so fortunately and unfortunately, in this case, we get to know people quite well. And there's 2 folks in particular, these 2 good friends from college that had come back to Alaska. They had been there on an earlier trip about a decade prior and had tried climbing a couple different things, and weather just wasn't in their favor. They also actually even helped out with a couple rescues while they were on the mountain that year. And they had come back kind of 10 years later and lives looking a lot different. And we're just really excited to be like back together, back in the mountains, giving it another go. And so we spent a bunch of time with them. They were looking at a route called the West Rib and the Upper West Rib on Denali. And so I bet we interact with them 3 or 4 times. And because of the location is in this big bowl, we can kind of watch everybody. So with binoculars or with a spotting scope, you can kind of see where everybody's at throughout the days. And so you can keep track. Somebody tells you, hey, I'm going over on this thing. I'll be 3 or 4 days. You can then watch them kind of camp their way and climb their way up these routes. Oh,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat location. And these two gentlemen were over on their climbing route for kind of three or four nights, and we'd been watching them, watching everybody else on the mountain, and unfortunately we got a call one morning that just asked, hey, have you been in touch with our son? And that call came through, and it was like, no, but actually, like, not everybody I'd be able to answer that question about, but those ones in particular, nope, but we saw them last night. We saw where they were camped. Like, I knew who they were talking about. And these two guys, we couldn't see them on the ridge anymore, and didn't know where they were. But oftentimes at that point in the climate, people will go out of view as they get towards the summit, and we can't see them. I was like, hey, I'm sure everything's okay. And they're like, well, they check in pretty consistently every night, every morning, and we didn't hear from them last night. We didn't hear from them this morning. It's like, okay, well, weather came in a bit, and it's a bit windy up there today, so potentially out of batteries. Also potentially maybe just really poor connection with that wind up there, or most likely they just don't want to be in the wind anymore and they're on the move. They're just trying to get down. And kind of hung up the phone, went about the rest of our day. And probably 3 hours later, I'll just never forget the sound of people in camp. As I mentioned, it's just this big bowl. People are resting there. People are getting ready for their climbs over the course of probably, everybody spends a couple of days there. And I could just hear screams in camp. And that's never a good thing. And it's not a normal thing there at all. Like, you'll hear hooting and hollering, you'll hear people having fun, you'll hear music, but screams just really unsettling in that big glacier basin. And I do remember, taking what felt like a minute, but it was probably 10 seconds to get out of the tent and kind of look at what might be going on, and just seeing people pointing and gesturing over towards this really steep face on the mountain. And the unmistakable view of two people just falling repeatedly and kind of cartwheel falling down this zone called the Mesner Couloir on the mountain.
You're watching it, like
We're just
watching them fall.
And brutal, man. Just like awful scenario that everyone in camp, there's nothing to do except sit and watch. For our team,
okay. So real quick, I did not expect that. Like, holy cow. So somebody saw them slip and start to fall, started screaming. Everybody comes out and is watching these two dudes fall down like hundreds of feet. Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
Oh no, 1,000. It's a 5,000 foot couloir, and so to go, it's from 19,000 where it's 14. So it's just brutal. Like, something no one should ever have to see. And for us, there was kind of the momentary pause where we're all watching, and then it's like, okay, this is now our job, being the team that's going to be at the base of this fall. And so then very quickly, even before the fall had finished, we left one person out there to watch, so we knew where they end up, and that everybody else was like, okay, go get your ready packs, let's start getting gear and mobilizing to be out of our camp. We on Denali, as an aside, typically have kind of a 30-minute go time. I know for everyone else here is like, oh, we're out the door in 5 minutes, we're out the door in 10. Yeah. And for us, gathering the gear, knowing our initial approach is going to be on foot, we're going to have to climb a couple thousand feet to get to these folks. We could be out there overnight in, below freezing, below zero temperatures. Like, we've got to be ready to stay out and deal with ourselves, but then also with the patient. And so we typically have everybody with a ready pack ready to go. But if we're out of camp in 30 minutes, that's a good time stamp for us. Just knowing that we need to be prepared to be out there for 36 hours is kind of what our target is, in whatever weather comes. And so for us, just getting that team ready, I think we were out pretty close to that 30 minutes, but I think just the unfortunate one of this entire rescue, and there's a couple pieces after, but it was a pretty straightforward recovery after this point. The unfortunate part was there was other climbers that were up near them that were able to ski down to their location before we got there. And so unfortunately there was private climbers that were the first responders and first on scene. Again, stuff that people shouldn't see, not accustomed to seeing, maybe should never see, even if you were a rescue responder. And for these folks, as just private climbers out for a day skiing, and then they're over here dealing with two people that they don't know that are now deceased.
Oh my
Something
gosh.
else that, it's just another component. I think we often think so much about the lessons in this one. Once we got on scene, made the assessment, was, I think first is dealing with all the bystanders. Now we've got an entire camp who watched this, like probably 100 people watched this. And now we've got 3 other people that skied over, that were just on a day trip, like out climbing and skiing by themselves, that ended up being first responders. And then I think the third component is knowing the people. And so now here's these 2 people that it's a unique environment there where we do interact with everybody. We brief every single climber that comes on the mountain in town, and then we see them all the way up the mountain. And so to have interacted with these guys so many times, and here they are, my age, doing the things I like to do, out for what is supposed to just be vacation and like a reunion with his buddy. And now these 2 young guys are dead. And I think that the reality of that is tough. I think it's really easy for us in our rest of our world, when we go to rescue somebody, or you're doing EMS, or you're doing flight medicine, it's really easy to look at some of our patients and be like, well, that's not me. Yeah, they might be, whether poor health, or they were doing something, have a chronic illness or a disease that I don't have, or it's really easy to kind of separate ourselves. And this job in Alaska has been really eye-opening, in that you can't, because everybody's out there doing the same things that we all love to do, that we're also out there doing. When we're not involved in rescue up there, we're out climbing and skiing to stay in shape. Like, we're out there all doing the same thing because we love it. Yeah. And I think that's the hard part of that rescue in particular. I think one is the larger community that saw it, and then these folks that were first responders, like the people that rolled up on them first with no training and no equipment to deal or to assess a deceased patient, or even a critically injured patient. And then lastly for us is like, these are people we knew and people we had interacted with. And I think those were the really hard parts of that one. That's unique to some of our environments, where maybe for you maybe the military crews that are listening is like going out to deal with one of your own. Like that's a window or a door that most of us don't want to walk through or don't want to have to. And it is a reality at times, but it makes it a lot more challenging when you can see yourself in those people. And I think for us on that rescue, that was probably the biggest take home, I think, for all of us, was just, hey, they were doing what we were planning to do later that day as well, was to just be out there climbing in the sun with buddies and
enjoying life.
Yeah. And how quickly that changed for those 2 people. And yeah, so I think that one, for obvious reasons, was pretty memorable, and has absolutely stuck with me this whole time. And those pieces that I mentioned, I think myself and then the team that I was with that day, all of us kind of carry those pieces with us. And I do think that's important with all this, is like, you got to find your way through it, right? Like, how do you get past that? And it's like, for me, it's like, okay, celebrating those guys' lives, what they were doing, but then also it's like, I am determined to hold whatever lesson I can take from those into every patient, every rescue, every interaction I have with people going forward. And that feels really important, because it's hard. There's no reason those guys aren't here today. Like, there's no rationale that you can get your brain to. So it's like, okay, how do I move forward, but in like that really positive and kind of healthy way, so that we can prevent this from happening to me or other people. I think it's been the kind of transition that happened to me that day, was like, okay, how do I make or take some good out of this in something that there's no apparent good? Like, really none.
Yeah. That's so I have never had to do that myself, to respond to somebody that, either a friend or a colleague or an acquaintance that I know. For me, it's usually arrive on scene, I pick somebody up, victim, patient, whatever it is, load them, go, drop them off, and I usually never see them again.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting realm. Wow.
Yeah, so that one was memorable as you asked.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, the next rescue that came to mind that has had some kind of lasting impact on me was this carbon monoxide poisoning. It actually involved 2 climbers, and it was about 3 summers ago. I don't think we often think about it. Carbon monoxide is this, like thing that you go onto a mountain and you're thinking, okay, how can I get sick? How can I get hurt? And I think it's kind of in the back of all of our minds. It's
Nobody's
also
driving a car with the garage
No.
closed or
but storms happen. And then when storms happen, we all move inside these little tent shelters and try to batten them down. And then we're cooking inside. And that is where we probably see the biggest threat of this on the mountain. And it's funny, every year the Park Service buys us like a CO detector and sends it up to our high camp, and we put it in our cook tent, and it's beeping all the time and it drives us nuts. So we throw it out the door and we'll get another one next year. And so it's like, I think it's actually probably a much bigger problem than any of us want to acknowledge. And we're all probably rolling around with higher than normal CO levels during those trips because the ventilation's just tough and it's not adequate. There's no fan in there that's blowing anything out. And so unfortunately in this storm, and it had probably been storming for 2 days and brutal, like ground blizzard, like unable to travel, like difficult to even just move across your camp. So for us, we've got a cook tent and a comms tent and a medical tent and then sleeping tents. And so even going between those, which are like 15 feet apart, like almost impossible, like just raging, ripping people's tents apart, like a bad ground storm. And at some point it starts to cool down, calm down, and camp's starting to move around a little bit. You can just tell, like, okay, storm's getting better. And so people are out moving around, and we just happen to be having dinner ourselves over in our cook tent. And this storm, I think probably 2 days is not an exaggeration. And you can hear things really long distances at Denali. Like it's just a quiet place. And so when someone's yelling or screaming or running or moving fast or even breathing heavy, you can hear people from some distance away. And we're sitting in this cook tent and we hear somebody like panting, running, like starting to yell or scream to us to get our attention, but can't get it out because, again, it's at 14,000 feet. So finally, this person kind of busts through our tent door. And to be honest, the 5 people on my rescue team all heard something different. We all heard carbon monoxide poisoning, but we all heard a different number of people. Someone heard a whole group, someone heard one person, someone heard 10 people. And so we're all like, it just kind of brings you back to that initial like training of like, okay, take that deep breath and like pay attention to what someone's saying first.
Yeah.
And so I think this one was really memorable for me because it was one of those times where I had a great lesson I was the leader on this team and the team lead for this rescue patrol, and we bring volunteers on there with us. And so I happened to have the commander of the Alaska PJs was on my team, the most skilled, amazing person ever. Yeah, we get to interact with those guys and have them on a bunch of our patrols, and they're just such an awesome resource for us. And so he's there and just doing as told. He normally is commanding like God knows how many people, and here he is like taking orders from me and my little team of 3 other people. It's like, yeah, whatever you want, Dave. So it's chaotic to say the least, because what I had heard was a guided team had all succumbed to CO poisoning. So don't have a clear picture of what's going on, not sure what we're going to. We're like, okay, everybody, it's right across camp, so we don't need to prepare for a huge extended outing. But we need every bit of oxygen we've got. We need all of our med jump kits. Those are the priority pieces for us to bring over there now. They're in camp, so we've got resources we can kind of pillage from there if we need them. But right now we need oxygen. That's what we're called. We get over there, and also during this time, it's pretty scattered. Like, we didn't all stop to regroup, kind of tasked out people with things, and then we all left on our own. So it was like, hey, when people had whatever it was I had said to go get, or whatever I grabbed myself, we were all left as individuals. And I think these all circle back to the debrief at the end. It was great and enlightening. But then we get over there, and essentially we've got two people that one absolutely looks as though he's died, and another one looks very near to that, but starting to kind of like stumble around and
still alive, but neither of them look good. And so over a very short course of time, we get in, kind of spread the crowd, because there was like, there's hundreds of people in camp, and they're all kind of now have descended on this location. First thing we do is get the tent off, like just rip the tent off of them and just get that kind of enclosed and contained airspace open to fresh air. And then we each kind of divided into teams. I had a physician's assistant with me, sent her to the patient that was starting to move around. And then I went to the one that wasn't moving at all. And then literally, man, there's very few times that you feel like a superhero in these jobs. Yeah.
And it's really good when you feel like a superhero and you didn't actually do anything. And so literally the actions of pulling this tent off, introducing some fresh air, and then sitting and talking to the guy who looked dead, he came back too, starts interacting, starts joking around, remembers his name, and then slowly just works through that like reboot process of like, oh, I'm alive. I know my name. I know what time of day it is. I know where I'm at.
Oh my Lord, what?
But to watch, it's like just I think the couple things that were really apparent is it was the middle of a storm. If that storm had gone on any longer, we would have just found two dead people in their tents. Who knows when, like days later. There's tents all over this place.
Yeah.
And they were a private party of two that were in there cooking together. People sometimes will leave their tents up and go climb other places and be gone for a day or two and come back to their tent. And so how that could have ended up so much worse, or it could have ended up so much worse in so many different ways. And it's just so fortunate that it didn't. And for whatever reason, the one guy that I mentioned in the group that was kind of stumbling around was able to just like thrust himself out of his tent. And so an arm came out. And then someone in the tent next to them saw and was like, huh, that's weird. It's like a person just collapsed in that tent and went to investigate. And that is the only reason those two people are alive right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's like those guys would have just sat in there and carbon monoxide themselves to death just because out of necessity, they were cooking in their tent. They were in their tent. Storm was raging. So they closed everything, no ventilation. Snow was getting in every nook and cranny, they said. And so they were just cooking, trying to make some water in this enclosed environment, and got sleepy, started nodding off. One totally went out. And it was actually the guy who thrust himself out of the tent. He's a fighter pilot in Austria by training. And he just said, he's like, it came back to when we were able to talk to them and spend time with them over the next couple of days. He's like, it was just my training. He's like, I remember my training of doing like G-force training and things like that. When I start to pass out, when I start to like, my world starts to go black. Yeah. That is what kicked in. And I was like, I've got to get out of here. And he's like, I lunged across the tent with whatever remaining like muscle and cognitive power I had, thrust an arm out. And that's what saved those dudes' lives. And, like amazing story that could have ended horribly for those two and for their families. And somehow today they're alive. And we look like heroes. And all we did literally was take their tent off them. And then air came, fixed the problem. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that never would have happened without you. Yeah, it would have happened. happened with any of you if you just did the same thing.
Well, we're not going to tell anybody that. We're going to tell them you're like
Yeah,
heroes.
yeah.
Did you see that?
So
Hands on your hips. Da-da-da.
Oh yeah. Another save for the day. We'll go mark it on the
Hail
wall.
the conquering heroes.
And
Oh
then,
my gosh, Dave, that's crazy.
so then we circle back, and it was really great. Like this entire response, that every time we go on a rescue, there's something we should be learning, something we should be getting better at. And they're usually the thing that's nagging you in the back of the head. And I knew it. Like as soon as we're back in camp, I'm like, we're debriefing that one, because that was a shit show. And it was that way because of my lack of leadership. And, I think
wow, way to take ownership on that one. Well done.
But it just, and it was great too, because having the PJ commander, my buddy Matt, on there was awesome, because he, having somebody that just shoots straight, and was like, great, let's debrief this. Like, let's dig into this. Let's dig into every piece of it so that doesn't happen to me and doesn't happen to us as a team going forward. And, I think all the way back from that first response is like someone comes up to you screaming, and you're just like, all of us heard something different. Problem number one, instead of being like, wait a second, what did you say? Like, how many people, what are we going to deal with? And it's not a whole like guided group of 10 people. It wasn't one person, it was two. Like just that like set everything, I think, in motion. And so that panicked request resulted in our panicked response, or my panicked response, and that's just uncalled for. It was also, we don't respond in camp too often. Everything was out of the ordinary, like I could see where everybody was congregating. That never happens. We usually have, as I mentioned, half an hour. We all put on our boots, we get ready, we like slowly go out the door and get ready for 36 hours away from camp little experience. And I think all those things kind of contribute. Oh, it's just over there. And so the same thing, tasking out people, probably not as clearly as I could have. Hey, you get this, you get this, you get this. Didn't have a cohesive plan ever portrayed to each person or to the whole group. And then people, myself being the worst, I probably grabbed stuff the soonest and was out the door and just left my team behind. Not briefed. They could see where it was. And there I am over there pulling tent off people before I look as the rest of my team is like slowly filtering into this spot. And so many lessons, so many failures, so many, like, it was literally like a case study in how not to do this. And it was awesome because it all happened at once. Like normally it's like, there's one or two things. And I was like, God, I could have done every single step of that better and should have. Yeah. But of course, in the end, it's all about looking like a hero, and we did. But God, getting to that point was not pretty, and not something like probably the most insightful experience for me, and to places that I need to be really cognizant to pay attention and slow down. And he just kept saying, like every time I'd see Matt, I think for the rest of that trip, he was like, tactical pause. I was like, shut up. Tactical pause.
I know that
combat
term.
Breathing.
It's a great term, like a tactical pause. And that's just take that minute before you rush in. Actually, one of my buddies, Ashton, just said, don't rush to your death. Take a minute. Yeah. Like I love it. Tactical pause.
Every training you've ever been in, every medical scenario. What do you say? Scene safe, scene safe, scene safe, scene safe. Yeah. Like all that just becomes like verbal diarrhea. That like, oh yeah, it actually means something. Like, slow down. Hey, what did you say the problem is? Okay, here's the plan, everyone. Like all those things that you practice time and time again. And then when it was execute time, it was dumpster fire. But again,
oh my gosh,
great outcomes. Everybody lived, all these things, but they did so in spite of my actions and in spite of my leadership. And I think that was kind of the second piece of all of that I said. I was like, you know what, everybody, like in spite of complete lack of leadership and a poor to non-existent plan, like the end result was you all stepped up and figured out what needed to be done on your own, and we got it done, which is like the epitome of team that
Yeah.
hopefully we're surrounding ourselves with. And like on my bad day, somebody's got my back. And
Yeah.
on your bad day, hopefully I'm there to fill in and have your back, because those are going to happen. Like it was like complete brain fart on my account that day, and just such a good reset to be like, okay, here you are, like 9 years or 10 years into this job as like the rescue leader on these patrols, and you just made like the JV look like the all-star team. Like that was horrible, man.
Oh, good for you for
Yeah.
owning it. Yeah, like I love doing debriefs. I don't like screwing up, so but at the same time, when you screw up, man, you own it, come back and be like, you know what, you're right. That needs to be fixed, and this is what I can do better. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
we've been pushing really hard on our hoist team in particular back in Salt Lake area. It's just for effective debriefs. I know it's so in the military, I think in particular does this really well, where you focus on the stuff that's actually going to make you better the next time. And that is very rarely the good jobs and the pats on the back and the things that we did well. Like that has such little value. It might feel good. You might be psyched for the high five, but it's not really what changes anything or changes people. It's what can I do better? What can you do better? What can we do better? Like those are the only questions that matter. And once you can get there and be like, hey, we are all going to have bad days, and being able to, like you said, just to own it and be like, yeah, I'm going to have a horrible day. I'm going to blow it like every step of the way. And somehow you all are going to make it happen. Even with me, like doing everything in my power to set you up for failure. And you still, because we had a good team and because we had trained a bunch ahead of time. And that's for me, that kind of epitome of all this, like that team trust piece that, we're all going to struggle at times.
It's who you surround yourself with as well. I mean, if you have some guys that are like high speed, low drag, I like to think that if you and I were working together, even you and I have never worked together, but if we did and we had something going on, that I would know, like from all my training, I could bring in, and then with all your training, you could bring in, and we would meet in the middle and just make it work, and that's pretty awesome. So.
Yeah, I think if you're leaving any rescue or even any training and you don't have one concrete thing or a couple concrete things to be like, I need to work or focus on this, then I think we're wasting time, because oftentimes I feel like I've left debriefs and I was like, okay, well, we all just sat around, told each other that we're awesome. Now we're going for a beer. It's like, that's enjoyable. Yes. But getting better? No.
I'm going to tell you a little secret right now, which is no longer going to be a secret. We went voice training just yesterday. And one of the things that we came back with the debrief is in my conning, I standard up procedure is forward and right. If you have a space, it was 1. You want to give a direction and a number, a closing rate. And I actually changed it while we were in flight. And I was like, I need you to come a little bit left, just a little bit left. Nowhere in any of our writing is that standard terminology. And I had done it throughout the entire flight, not really thinking about it. But when we got back to debrief, the pilot was like, by the way, that's not, standard terminology. Ha, ha, ha. It was a joke. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you calling me out right now, because if I was training a new guy, I would be calling him out right now. And that's not something I should be teaching younger guys. So thank you. I'm sorry. My bad. It won't happen again. And then today we go out training and that didn't come up. So bonus.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard as you get into maybe a trainer role or a leadership role, where to have somebody speak up gets hard. And they're like, oh, he's been doing this forever, or I probably shouldn't speak up, or finding things gets harder. Like that pilot's probably been waiting a year to find something. Jason, like, yes, I have something to give you, which is good, man. Like,
he probably was.
He's been waiting for a year, which is awesome to have that person be like, hey, good job today, except for this one thing. And it's like, if we're getting to the point where we're that nitpicky with our feedback, then that means we're probably functioning pretty well. And for you to hear that, I talk about a lot with people that we're training and on the team is there's a huge difference between you suck and that sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And it is
which
a
I love that
monumental,
in your presentation, by the way. One of my favorites.
It's like it is one of my favorites. We hear it so often as you suck. Like, Jason, for the rest of your life, you're destined to suck because you said a little bit left this one day. It's like, no, that sucked, Jason. Fix it. Tomorrow you'll be back to who you normally are. And like, it is always that thing you did sucked. It is fixable. You can work on it. We're not saying you suck, but we often hear it that way. And that's where debriefing just comes off the rails. People are like, I don't want to give feedback. I don't want to hear this. People keep telling me that I'm a crappy person. It's like, no, they're just saying you do crappy things. But those are fixable.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what? I want to touch on that a little bit more when we're done, because I really like that. But let's get into your next one. So you said you had one more memorable one in a fall.
Yeah, this is kind of last one. Again, each one of these stuck out because I think for me, it's really important to take something back from all of these. Like, what can I pull out of every training, every rescue that will make me better and maybe make a team better? And there's been some great mentors in my life, as I assume you have had as well. And two of those have come from the Park Service for me. And one was the person that used to run the rescue program at Denali, and his name is Darren Miller, and just an amazing human being, and just one of those people that seems to just spit out wisdom like at every casual conversation. And his one relates back to the carbon monoxide one, and he would always say, their emergency is not your emergency. Their emergency is not my emergency. Their emergency is not our emergency. Like, their emergency is their emergency, and we're not going to change anything. God, if I had that like on a billboard that day with the CO poisoning, like running out that, like, he would have been so ashamed as I'm running past the sign that Daryl's like flashing the billboard being like, their emergency is not your emergency. What are you doing? And so that one stuck. And then the second one came on this next rescue. And that was from another amazing mentor who used to run the Teton rescue team named Rennie Jackson. He's got an amazing number of things that he said over the time that have stuck with me. But on this one in particular, the scenario was, it was late in the evening. So because it's Alaska, we have daylight forever, so this is middle of the summer.
Amazing.
I think this is May. And so these people are climbing at, like, it's not unusual. Most people climb in the lower 48 and then you're up, kind of get up before the sun so that you're at a peak or a summit, kind of midday, earlier in the day, and then you leave.
Yeah.
Alaska, totally different. People aren't and shouldn't be moving before the sun's up. And so that's like 9, 10 in the morning, sometimes 11 in the morning. I've left to go to the summit of Denali at 1 o'clock in the afternoon before, because I know that it's just getting warm. And then also I know that I've got sun until 11 o'clock that night. And so just that the day has shifted up there a little bit for those climbing windows. And so this team had left like everybody else. And so it's probably at 8 o'clock at night when they're getting towards the summit ridge, which is a late evening regardless. And so 8 o'clock, they're heading up. They're last people on the mountain, and it's a group of 4. And that, just like the first incident I told you about, everyone's roped together. And so unfortunately, that first fall we talked about, it was likely one of them that fell, but the safety, in hopes that the other person can self-arrest and stop the fall on your rope, then that'll stop you from falling, is the idea. So the rope is your protection if your partner can stop. If it's too hard or too steep or icy and they can't do that, then you need to put in protection, some other snow pickets or anchors, so that if one of you falls, it's the anchor that stops you, because the other person won't be able to. Unfortunately, that's probably what happened in the first instance we talked about, and it is what happened in this incident that we'll talk about. And so we had 4 people on one rope. One of them fell, and in that fall, one of the people broke his leg really bad. His lower had a tib-fib open fracture, so the lower portion of your leg bone sticking out. So this is now to set the scene. We're 8 o'clock at night. Sun is, we're in the kind of dusk hours. It's getting cold. We're at 19,700 feet. So we're high up when this happens, this team, and they're the last people up there. Everybody else has already gone down for the day. So like everyone else is back in camp. We don't have a rescue team that's up there, and then the winds are picking up. Of course, like every rescue, it's never the bluebird sunny afternoon. And so we get this call in the evening. So probably 9 o'clock, they start mobilizing us saying, hey, we got one person that's immobile. They're trying to create shelter up there so that they can all stay safe together, but they're having a hard time keeping the shelter together because the winds are blowing so much. They've lost some equipment. And so you can just start to hear over the radio and in this relay, like kind of the pieces are coming apart. And the night is only supposed to get worse. They're projecting 60 to 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
stuck at 19,000. It sounds like they've been able to get to a lower spot. But this is 9 o'clock at night. And so we also in the Park Service are an exclusive VFR program. So only flying in the daytime with those Park Service helicopters. And so for us, we're about to hit our pumpkin hour and winds aren't suitable for flight. And so we're scrubbing it for the night, which is a really hard thing to do. We all regroup in the morning, and this is when I think it was really impactful to have Rennie there. He was up there auditing us and doing some training for us from his other program. And we're walking there, and it's like, now we're 12 hours into this. It's been raging 60 miles an hour sustained up there. Temps that we're seeing at 14,000 camp are well below zero. Like, it's an awful night. And we've also gotten word that sometime in the night, their kind of makeshift shelter blew apart, and that at some point the team split up. And so now we're faced with this kind of 12 hours of sustained horrible weather. The team's not together anymore. Like, people went to get her help or whatever happened to split them all up. And
so they split everybody up. Nobody's together anymore.
At that point we just heard the team split up. And so you start thinking about this, and you think immediately hey, we were going to get this guy with the broken leg, like that was our patient. But now you're like, whoa, this might be 4 patients, it could be 3, like who knows what we're up against now. And I just remember I made the callous comment as we're walking to the station with Rennie, and I was just like, no way, that guy's still alive. And he's just like, never count anybody out. And I was like, okay, whatever, Rennie, let's keep going. Another dumb thing Dave said. And we get over there, and then sure enough, like 6 hours later, we have great working relationship with the military. And so one of our crew is up in a C-130 doing kind of aerial ops and orbits and running comms while we bring in other aircraft. Winds are still horrible, but they, with that aircraft, are able to actually get visual on one individual up on this 19,500 foot plateau. And this dude is waving. That is the guy that I had said, no way that guy's alive. And Rennie told me correctly, don't ever count anybody out. And, long story short, we end up rescuing everybody in this team, end up short hauling this guy off with his broken leg back down to get care. He ended up losing everything below that break, unfortunately, due to frostbite and the length of time that it was exposed. But there was then 3 other people unaccounted for that had to be found. So 2 ended up making it back to camp. 1 did not, unfortunately, just perished about 1,000 feet above camp, probably from the elements.
Wow.
And so again, you just you see this, and we've all been a part of some scenario where everything's going fine, and then one thing goes wrong, and then another, and just that like cascade of things that start going wrong. And that seems like what happened here. And I think for us, like the take homes for us were exactly what Rennie had said. And it's like, don't count anybody out. You never know. So it ends up being the totally healthy guy that was making his way back to camp who dies. And it's not the person you think. And I think just people's resiliency, people's will to live, their individual circumstances, all of those things are factors that we'll never know. And our job is really to just go respond and do the best we can for those people. Yeah. And if we hid for whatever reason listen to my kind of perspective and be like, hey, you know what, maybe we should go after these other three and go after, then we would have missed somebody that's still living up there that was the most critical and should have been the first one. And you think about those times where if you do count somebody out, or you're like, no way, it's no way that person's going to make it, let's focus our energy over here. It's like, well, maybe we should check on most critical first before we write them off, or before we say, hey, because I couldn't survive that, I wouldn't have lived through that night with a busted leg out in the open. Like, we were able to see from the aircraft too, before we even got him, that he had moved probably 200 yards, just scooting on his butt, probably to stay warm or trying to make it back to camp through this hellacious storm. And it's like those pieces of kind of the human resiliency, I think, are kind of not things we can quantify. And you know, such a good lesson for me that stuck with me and that team, like here in Rennie, you know, the wise, like, elder in our group, just being like, hey, I've seen a lot, and like, you never know who's going to make it out there. You know, the person that you immediately write off, like, no way, that person's got no experience, they're in over their head, they're not going to make it. And then they do, versus the totally experienced person that doesn't. And, you know, it's like, there's a bit of, you know, flipping a coin, I think, on some of these, and we just got to do our best to give everybody the best chance. And that's really all we can do. And it was that, for me, it was the take home there. Then at some point in this mix, I think probably Rennie's other most famous saying that just sticks with me all the time, he's like, you need to know this when you're moving a fridge with your wife, you need to know this when you're doing a rescue operation, but you need to know two answers to two questions. What's the plan and who's in charge? And throughout that day, he asked that probably 15 times. He just kept circling back. He's like, what's the plan and who's in charge? He's got a hilarious story. He's like, yeah, my wife and I were just trying to move a fridge. I asked the same question, drives her nuts. But he's like, we didn't have a plan. No one was in charge. Fridge was going to kill one or both of us. Same thing in a rescue. It's like, what's the plan and who's in charge? And just keep circling back to that. When things start coming off the rails or things are going sideways a little bit, it's just like, okay, everybody, do we have a plan here? And is someone leading this plan? If not, circle back. And that goes back perfectly to something I should have listened to in that CO response. It's like, okay, Dave, what's the plan here? I don't know. I'm just running around grabbing stuff and leaving. Who's in charge? You are definitely not in charge. So appoint someone or get it together.
Oh, what a great piece of advice. I like that.
Yeah.
If my wife was here right now, she would say, I'm always in charge. I say, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay, just tell me the plan for the day.
Yeah, that's right. What's the plan?
I'll execute.
I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. Well, then make one. You're in charge. Come on, honey.
Yeah. Yeah. So those, when you ask those questions, you know, what's memorable and what, those are the ones that have really stuck out and really informed, I think, who I am today and who I aspire to be with these other teams that I work with and who I emulate. And, you know, I think fully circling back to that first one, which is a really grim story, that fall in that Mesner Couloir, is like looking for the good things. The other great thing that's come out of that is I've become really good friends with one of those climbers' mom, and we probably touch base once a year and have kept in touch this whole time. And so those like human pieces of all this, I think, when you can find them, have been really gratifying for what we do. Because I know we all say we like helping other people, and I know that is somewhere in the list of why you're a hoist rescuer or why you're on a special ops team or why you're a climbing ranger. But there's other things on top of helping other people, and it's probably fun and team and exciting work and all those other things. Helping other people is in there. And so when you do get to kind of circle back to that component of it, like, now I've got a really great friend and person in my life who I keep in touch with that I would have never known. And we came together in really poor circumstances, but I think something really good has come out of that as we kind of both search for a way forward.
Wow. Dude, these stories are incredible. Thank you so much for sharing them. This is awesome.
Man. Thanks for listening to all my screw ups. That's you're welcome. You
know what? I'm glad you actually said that, because I do want to touch on that. I really enjoyed your presentation at HAI when you were or APSA, and specifically talking about the you suck and that sucked. I cannot agree with you enough. And for everybody out there, you got to be able to take a grain of salt. When somebody's telling you that something went wrong, they might be looking at you and be like, yeah, you screwed that up. That was your fault. Or maybe I'm taking ownership and I'm saying, yeah, that's my fault. But at the same time, that was an event. Like it doesn't, if you know, like
Yeah.
I'll let you piggyback it off from there, but
No, it is. It's not our definition. And I just think it's the frame of reference. If
Yeah.
I think innately we hear it as you suck. And it's just, I think it's natural. We all do. Like as soon as someone comes with feedback, and it's probably like why we all like the soft feedback and the easy debriefs, but none of that shit makes you better. Like none of it. But the stuff, if you really want to get better, if your team wants to get better, like you got to hear those things and you just got to be like, okay, cool. They are telling me something to work on that I can work on, that is fixable, that is totally often pretty easy to correct. For you is like, oh yeah, why was I not saying left 3, 2, 1 like I do every other day? Like I don't know why, but I'm just going to fix it. And if you catch me doing it again, call it out in the moment. So I like have that trigger or whatever to stop it. But it's the hard part, but it's also, I think, what separates the kind of good or moderate teams from the great teams is the people that are like, let's get into the meat. What did I mess up? What did I tell you I messed up? What'd you mess up? And let's fix those things and do it again tomorrow. And that's like such an amazing group culture to be around if you can do it. And if you can't get it in your group, then just do it for yourself. Go ask people, what can I do? But hey, I think I could have done these couple things better, but what'd you see? What am I blind to? And because it takes a lot. Like we often think like, God, it sucks to get that feedback. Think of the effort that we have to put in though to give somebody feedback. Like for your pilot the other day, is like, I'm guessing he thought about that for a while. I was like, do I even bring this up? Like, I know Jason really well. We're buddies.
He did not. Okay. He didn't even question calling me up. It was like an opportunity. Pow! Let's punch him right in the face.
Okay. Well, some more thoughtful and caring and considerate people in your life probably think a little bit before giving you feedback. And I think acknowledging that too is like, it's hard to give people feedback, especially if they're more senior than you or more trained than you or higher in the rank than you are, to say like, hey, there's stuff you can work on too. And I'm only telling you this because I want this place to be great and I want you to be great. And that framework totally resets, I think, everyone. Is like, oh, you're just telling me that thing I did sucked? Okay, great. I do sucky things all day long, but I'm not a sucky person. And that was a really healthy change for me, because otherwise you're just like, your bristles are up all the time. Like people give you feedback. It's like, well, why don't we talk about all the good stuff I did?
Yeah. Let's see. I want it warm and fuzzy. Okay. I'll end it on a positive note.
Yeah.
Everything else sucked.
Give me the happy sandwich.
Oh man, that's awesome. Dude, thank you for that one. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
Dave, all these stories and the advice and everything you're giving me and everybody else out here is unbelievable. Thank you so much for joining us and just sharing your knowledge, dude. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me and giving me the chance. I'm just literally spouting other things that people told me. And so it's mainly a testament to them, but thanks a ton for taking the time with me.
Oh, absolutely. And the next time I get to Denali, I'll call you first, or Montana, or wherever the heck you're going to be. All right. Salt Lake City, or you know what? Why don't you come back to the East Coast? We'll hang out in Boston for a minute. All right.
Just call my cell phone. I'll come get you from wherever I am.
You know what? Why? Let's just roll the dice. Spin the globe. We'll hit, wherever the finger stops the globe, that's where we'll meet. All right.
That sounds great, man.
I'm in for that. Awesome. Dave, I'll catch you later. I will be in touch. I promise. It's been a pleasure, my man.
Thank you.
And with that, absolutely. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Go. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you on as a guest. Or if you have any questions about rescue or anything else we talk about here, send an email to Jason at therealresq.com. That's Jason at TheRealResq.com. You can also check us out on our web pages, therealresq.com, our Facebook page, and our Instagram page at The Real Rescue. Again, a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember, when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.